A 26-year-old woman is dead, and police are looking for her killer. They said the shooting may have happened in front of her own children.
Now, this happened in Montgomery County about 3 o'clock this morning on Torrington Place, just off Salem Avenue. News Center 7's Mike Campbell joins us live with what 911 calls and police are telling him. Mike?
Bitches be thinking you fucking with him. I'm not fucking with him. If you're fucking with him, why would you think I'm fucking with him? I'm fucking with him.
Today, we examine a murder that was announced before it happened. A crime where the victim herself predicted her own death, reported the danger, and still became another statistic in America's domestic violence epidemic.
Well, Gabrielle, investigators downtown at the Dayton Police Department headquarters and those here at the West Patrol Operations Division tell me the entire homicide squad is working on this case. Now, you could actually hear shots being fired when one person dialed 911, and it appears the victim herself made a chilling call moments earlier.
April 3rd, 2024, 2:49 a.m. A phone illuminates the darkness of a Dayton, Ohio bedroom. Montanae Davis, a 26-year-old nurse and mother of 2, types out what will be her final text message. "If anything happens to me, you know who did it." She hits send, then immediately dials 911. The digital clock on her nightstand begins what will become the most crucial countdown of her life, 15 minutes that separates safety from tragedy, life from death.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
We are not using the audio that appears to be the 26-year-old victim. She told dispatchers an ex-boyfriend was calling her, threatening to shoot up her house, and she told dispatchers she had 2 children. Then dispatchers received a second call they believe from another adult female that was in the house, but that call dropped.
Hello? 911, we got a call from this number. Is everything okay? Where are you? Where are you?
Police were already on the way after the first call, but more officers headed to the street and the home after the second call.
Across town, her ex-boyfriend Jamartay Brown is already in motion, fueled by jealousy and rage. He's made his intentions clear through threatening calls and messages throughout the night. Now, he's on his way to make good on those threats. What unfolds over the next 15 minutes will expose the devastating gap between calling for help and receiving it, a gap that proves fatal for a young mother who did everything right, yet still couldn't be saved. The story of Montanae Davis isn't just about relationship violence or police response times. It's about the terrifying reality that sometimes, even when you follow all the right steps, even when you call for help, even when you warn authorities, it still might not be enough. In the next few minutes, you'll hear the full story of what happened that night, including details from investigation that haven't been widely reported. You'll learn about the warning signs that preceded this tragedy, the frantic moments as Montanae tried to protect herself and her children, and the aftermath that left a community searching for answers. Here at Crime Scene Exposed, we dive deep into the most infamous crimes and disturbing cases like Montanae's that often go overlooked by mainstream media. From high-profile murder trials to domestic violence cases that escalate with deadly consequences, we uncover the truth behind these tragedies through detailed investigation and gripping storytelling. If you value these in-depth analyses of real crimes, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to join our community. Now, have you ever wondered if police response times really make the difference between life and death? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As we reconstruct the events of April 3rd, 2024, remember that behind the headlines was a real woman, a dedicated nurse, a loving mother, and someone who knew she was in danger. Someone who reached out for help before it was too late. But for Montanae Davis, those 15 minutes between her call and help arriving would prove fatal. The countdown had begun, and time was running out. Before she became a headline, before her name was added to the growing list of domestic violence victims, Montanae Antoinette Lamique Chantel Davis was a 26-year-old woman with dreams, responsibilities, and a life full of promise. Born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, Montanae had built a life centered around 2 core aspects of her identity: her career as a nurse and her role as a mother to 2 young children. Those who knew her described her with a consistent set of adjectives: loving, loyal, outgoing, ambitious, and hardworking. These weren't just casual compliments, they were reflections of how she lived her life every day. As a nurse, Montanae embodied the compassion and resilience required by her profession. Healthcare workers who knew her noted her dedication to patients and her ability to remain calm under pressure, a skill that would be tested in her final moments. Her choice of nursing as a career path spoke volumes about her character. She was someone who chose to dedicate her professional life to caring for others in their moments of vulnerability and need. But it was her role as a mother that truly defined Montane's priorities. Her 2 children were the center of her world, and her protective instincts toward them would become heartbreakingly evident during her final 911 call. Friends recall how she would light up when talking about her kids, how she worked tirelessly to provide them with stability and opportunities, and how their safety was always her paramount concern. She was the kind of mother who would do anything for her children, one friend later told local reporters. Everything she did, her job, her home, her daily routine, it was all built around giving them the best life possible. Montane's personal relationships had seen their share of turbulence. Her relationship with Jamartay Brown had ended, but like many domestic situations, the emotional and psychological connections didn't sever as cleanly as the official relationship status. While details about their relationship history remain limited in public records, what is clear is that by April 2024, Montanae considered him firmly an ex-boyfriend and had moved forward with her life. In fact, in the weeks before her death, those close to Montanae had noticed a positive change in her demeanor. She seemed happier, more confident, and forward-looking. The source of this newfound happiness appeared to be a new relationship, one that represented a fresh start and perhaps the promise of a healthier partnership than what she had experienced with Brown. This new chapter in her personal life seemed to energize Montanae. She shared her happiness on social media, posting updates and photos that showcased her optimism about the future. What she couldn't have known was that these very posts, these digital breadcrumbs of her happiness, would trigger a deadly reaction from her ex-boyfriend. Montanae's home on Torrington Place in Dayton was meant to be her sanctuary, a safe space where she could raise her children and build her future. She had created a warm environment there, balancing the demands of nursing shifts with the joys and challenges of motherhood. Neighbors described her as friendly but focused, someone who would wave and chat briefly while coming and going from work, often with her children in tow. As April began, Montanae was looking forward to spring and the new beginnings it symbolized. She had her health, her children, her career, and a new relationship that brought her joy. At 26, she had already established herself as a healthcare professional and devoted mother, with decades of potential ahead of her. But beneath this promising surface, a threat was growing, one that Montanae was becoming increasingly aware of, and one that would ultimately cut short all the possibilities that should have been hers. The relationship between Montanae Davis and Jamartay Brown followed a pattern that domestic violence experts have documented countless times. What begins as a normal relationship gradually reveals warning signs, boundaries are tested, and eventually control and intimidation replace what once might have been affection. At 24 years old, Jamartay Brown was 2 years younger than Montanae. Public records and police statements reveal little about how they met or when their relationship began. What is clear, however, is that by early 2024, whatever connection they once shared had deteriorated significantly. Montanae had firmly categorized him as her ex-boyfriend in her communications with police and family members. Friends of Montanae later revealed that the relationship had been troubled for some time. Brown had displayed possessive tendencies during their time together, often questioning Montanae about her whereabouts and becoming agitated when she wasn't immediately available to respond to his calls or messages. These behaviors, while concerning, had not immediately escalated to physical violence, a common misconception about how domestic abuse progresses. She would sometimes cancel plans last minute, one friend later told investigators. "We didn't realize at first it was because he would get upset if she went out without him." The exact timeline of their breakup remains unclear, but what is known is that Montanae had made attempts to establish boundaries and distance herself from Brown. She had made it clear to family and friends that the relationship was over and she was moving forward with her life. This decision, a healthy one for Montanae, appeared to trigger increasingly problematic behavior from Brown. What began as persistent calls and messages asking to reconcile gradually took on a more ominous tone. He began monitoring her social media accounts closely, noting who she interacted with and what she posted. When Montanae began sharing content related to her new relationship, Brown's communications shifted dramatically. The requests to get back together transformed into accusations, then veiled threats, and finally, in the days leading up to April 3rd, explicit threats of violence. Text messages recovered from Montanae's phone showed a disturbing progression. In late March, Brown sent messages questioning who she was seeing, demanding to know the identity of her new partner, and insisting that she was disrespecting him by moving on. By April 1st, just 2 days before the murder, the messages had escalated to statements like, "You think you can just replace me?" and "I'm not going to let you be with someone else." Montanae had begun documenting these communications, saving screenshots, and showing them to close friends. She expressed growing concern about Brown's mental state and his fixation on her new relationship. What she couldn't have anticipated was how quickly his threats would transform into action. On the night of April 2nd, leading into the early morning hours of April 3rd, Brown's communications reached a breaking point. He called repeatedly, each message more threatening than the last. The final escalation, his explicit threat to shoot up her house, prompted Montanae to make that crucial 911 call at 2:49 a.m. By then, the pattern of concerning behavior had completed its tragic progression from control to threats to deadly violence, all triggered by Montanae's simple desire to move forward with her life and find happiness after a troubled relationship. April 2nd had been an ordinary Tuesday for Montanae Davis. She completed her nursing shift, picked up her children, and returned to her home on the 700 block of Torrington Place in Dayton. There was nothing to suggest that in the early hours of the following morning, her life would come to a violent end. The timeline of events that unfolded in the early morning hours of April 3rd, 2024, has been reconstructed through 911 call records, police reports, witness statements, and evidence collected at the scene. What emerges is a harrowing sequence that began with threatening messages and ended in tragedy, all within a span of approximately 15 minutes. 11:30 p.m., April 2nd, Montanae puts her 2 children to bed and settles in for the evening. According to her phone records, she exchanges several text messages with her new partner, making plans for the coming weekend. 12:15 a.m., April 3rd, the first call from Jamartay Brown comes through. Montanae doesn't answer. Over the next 2 hours, he calls repeatedly, leaving increasingly agitated voicemails. 2:15 a.m., Brown's messages take a darker turn. "You think you can just post about your new man, and I won't do anything about it," reads one text recovered from Montanae's phone. "You're disrespecting me," reads another. 2:30 a.m., the threats become explicit. Brown texts, "I'm coming over there right now. You better be ready." Followed by, "I'm going to shoot up that whole house." 2:42 a.m., Montanae, now fully alarmed, wakes up another adult female who is staying in the house. She shows her the threatening messages and expresses fear that Brown might actually follow through. 2:49 a.m., Montanae makes the critical decision to call 911. The call, later released to investigators, captures her growing fear. "Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency?" "Montanae, my ex-boyfriend is threatening to come to my house and shoot it up. I have 2 children here." "Dispatcher, what's your address?" "Montanae, 700 block of Torrington Place." "Dispatcher, and your name?" Montanae Davis." "Dispatcher, is he there now?" "Montanae, no, but he's been calling and texting saying he's on his way. He's threatening to shoot up my house. I have my kids here." The dispatcher assures Montanae that officers will be dispatched to her location. The call lasts approximately 3 minutes, with the dispatcher gathering information about Brown, including his name and description. 2:52 a.m., the dispatch center logs the call and assigns it to patrol officers. Due to other active calls in the area, the response is not immediate. 2:55 a.m., a second call comes into 911 from another adult female in Montanae's home. This call is abruptly disconnected. When the dispatcher attempts to call back, there is no answer. 2:57 a.m., neighbors later report hearing the sound of breaking glass and a door being forced open at Montanae's residence. 2:58 a.m., according to police reconstruction of events, this is when Brown forces his way into the home through a rear door. The physical evidence at the scene indicates he broke the glass panel on the door, reached in, and unlocked it from the inside. 2:59 a.m., Montanae, alerted by the sound of breaking glass, rushes to check on her children. According to the other adult in the home who survived the attack, Montanae's first instinct was to place herself between the intruder and the bedrooms where her children were sleeping. 3 a.m. to 3:02 a.m., a physical confrontation occurs in the main living area of the home. Evidence suggests Montanae attempted to flee toward the front door, but was intercepted by Brown. Neighbors report hearing shouting, followed by multiple gunshots in rapid succession. 3:03 a.m. A neighbor, awakened by the gunshots, calls 911 to report the disturbance. 3:04 a.m. The first police units, already en route from the initial call, receive the updated information about shots fired and increase their response priority. 3:07 a.m. Police arrive at the scene approximately 18 minutes after Montanae's initial 911 call. They find the rear door forced open and Montanae lying in the living room with multiple gunshot wounds. The other adult female in the home is hiding in a bathroom with one of Montanae's children. The second child remains asleep, unharmed but traumatized, in a bedroom. 3:09 a.m. Officers secure the scene and call for emergency medical services. 3:12 a.m. Paramedics arrive and begin life-saving measures on Montanae, who is still alive but gravely injured. 3:20 a.m. Montanae is transported to Miami Valley Hospital in critical condition. 3:45 a.m. Despite the efforts of medical personnel, Montanae Davis is pronounced dead at the hospital from multiple gunshot wounds.
Police were already on the way after the first call, but more officers headed to the street and the home after the second call.
They found a female, 26 years of age, who had been shot. They did first aid at the scene, but unfortunately she passed away later at the hospital.
Dayton Police Major Brian Johns told us they are following up on some information shared with them in the 911 calls.
There is information that we are aware of, that there was like a break-in there first, that there was like a fight taking place, and then the shots were actually fired, and she was struck and killed.
By the time Montanae was pronounced dead at 3:45 a.m., a full investigative response was underway. The crime scene technicians arrived shortly after 4 a.m. and began the meticulous process of documenting and collecting evidence. They photographed the forced entry point, the blood spatter patterns in the living room, and the shell casings that indicated where the shooter had stood. 5 9mm casings were recovered, matching the number of wounds later identified during Montanae's autopsy. Detectives interviewed the adult female witness who had been in the home during the attack. Her testimony proved crucial, as she was able to positively identify Jamartay Brown as the intruder. She described how Brown had broken in through the rear door, confronted Montanae in the living room, and opened fire after a brief verbal altercation. According to her statement, Brown fled immediately after the shooting, leaving through the same door he had entered. The investigation quickly focused on locating Brown. Detectives obtained his cell phone records, which would later confirm his location near Montanae's residence at the time of the shooting. They also recovered the threatening text messages he had sent in the hours leading up to the murder, providing clear evidence of premeditation. Perhaps most damning was the 911 call Montanae had made less than 20 minutes before the shooting, in which she specifically named Brown as the person threatening her and described his intentions to shoot up her home. This recording would become a central piece of evidence in the case against him. By 6 a.m., just 3 hours after the shooting, police had issued an all-points bulletin for Brown. His photograph was distributed to all patrol units, and officers began checking known addresses associated with him.
And we're learning new information about a shooting that killed a woman who called 911 for help. Today, a grand jury indicted Jamartay Brown in connection with Montanae Davis's death. In a 911 call, Davis told dispatchers Brown was threatening to shoot up her house on Torrington Place. When police showed up, they found Davis dead. Brown is now charged with murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence.
The break in the case came at 10:15 a.m. when an alert patrol officer spotted Brown walking near a convenience store approximately 2 miles from the crime scene. Despite initially attempting to flee on foot, Brown was apprehended without further incident. A search of his person revealed he was not carrying a weapon, suggesting he had disposed of the murder weapon somewhere between the crime scene and his apprehension. During his initial interview with detectives, Brown exercised his right to remain silent and requested an attorney. He was booked into the Montgomery County Jail on preliminary charges of murder, aggravated robbery, and aggravated burglary. The Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office moved quickly to build their case. By April 5th, just 2 days after the murder, they had formally charged Brown with 1 count of aggravated murder with prior calculation and design, 2 counts of aggravated burglary, 1 count of having weapons while under disability due to a previous felony conviction, 2 counts of endangering children, The prosecutor's office announced they would pursue the case aggressively, citing the premeditated nature of the crime, the victim's explicit warnings to police, and the presence of children in the home as aggravating factors. If convicted on all counts, Brown would face a potential life sentence without the possibility of parole. As the investigation continued, detectives worked to recover the murder weapon and gather additional evidence to strengthen their case against the man who had announced his deadly intentions before carrying them out. The investigation into Montanae Davis's murder was about to take a disturbing turn. As detectives processed the evidence from her home on Torrington Place, they discovered something that removed any doubt about the targeted nature of this attack. Hidden among Montanae's personal belongings was a journal. Within its pages, investigators found detailed accounts of previous threatening incidents involving Jamartay Brown, incidents that Montanae had never reported to police. The journal entries dated back months, documenting a pattern of escalating behavior that Montanae had been quietly enduring while trying to protect her children and build a new life. But there was something else, something that would send a chill through even the most hardened investigators. Before we reveal this crucial piece of evidence that transformed the case, I want to take a moment to connect with you, our crime scene exposed community. We're about to reveal what investigators found at the scene that proved this wasn't a random act. If you're from Ohio, have you noticed an increase in domestic violence cases? Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your insights help us understand how these issues affect different communities across the country. And if you're finding value in this detailed breakdown of Montanae's case, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Now let's return to that critical discovery that changed everything about how investigators understood the events of April 3rd, 2024. Inside Montanae's bedroom, detectives found a hidden voice recorder. Montanae, fearing for her safety, had begun documenting Brown's threats. On this device was a recording from March 28th, just 6 days before the murder, in which Brown can be heard saying, "If I see you with him again, I'll kill you. I'd rather see you dead than with someone else." This recording became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, demonstrating not only Brown's intent but Montanae's awareness of the danger she faced. When Brown made his initial appearance in Montgomery County Common Pleas Court, he stood expressionless as the judge read the charges and denied bail, citing both the severity of the crime and the risk he posed to the community. The prosecution, led by Montgomery County Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Wilson, built their case on multiple pillars of evidence during the preliminary hearing on April 12th. First, they had Montanae's 911 call, in which she specifically named Brown as the person threatening her life. This recording, played in court, had a visible impact on those present. Second, they presented the voice recording found in Montanae's bedroom, evidence that she had been documenting Brown's threats for weeks. Third, they had the text messages Brown sent to Montanae in the hours before the murder, explicitly threatening to shoot up her house. Fourth, they had cell tower data placing Brown's phone near Montanae's residence at the time of the murder, contradicting his initial claim to investigators. Fifth, they had the eyewitness testimony of the adult female who had been in the home during the attack. Finally, they had recovered the murder weapon, a 9mm handgun found discarded in a storm drained 2 blocks from where Brown was apprehended. This is not a case about who did it, Wilson told the court. This is a case about a man who told the victim exactly what he was going to do, and then did it. The victim even recorded his threats and reported them to police before she was killed. The defense, led by Public Defender Thomas Reynolds, faced an uphill battle. Their strategy focused on Brown's mental state, suggesting that he had been emotionally disturbed due to the breakdown of his relationship. Mr. Brown was not in his right mind that night, Reynolds argued during a motion hearing on April 25th. He was overcome with emotion after seeing social media posts about Ms. Davis's new relationship. The defense attempted to suppress both the text messages and the voice recording, arguing they were obtained without Brown's knowledge or consent. Judge Michael Harrington denied these motions, ruling that Ohio's single-party consent law made the recording legally obtained evidence and that the text messages were sent voluntarily. As of late April 2024, Brown remains in custody at the Montgomery County Jail. A trial date has been set for August 15, 2024. The prosecution has indicated they will not seek the death penalty, but will pursue a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Legal experts following the case have noted that the prosecution's evidence is particularly strong, with the victim's own recordings creating what one legal analyst called testimony from beyond the grave. The voice recording, in particular, demonstrates that Brown's actions on April 3rd were not impulsive, but the culmination of escalating threats that Montanae had been quietly documenting while trying to protect herself and her children. The murder of Montanae Davis sent shockwaves through Dayton's healthcare community, where she had been a respected nurse. Colleagues at Miami Valley Hospital held a candlelight vigil on April 10th, with many sharing stories of Montanae's dedication to patients and her frequent mentions of her children. "She was always showing us pictures of her kids," said Sarah Jenkins, a fellow nurse. "Everything she did was for them." Neighbors on Torrington Place, many of whom had heard the gunshots that night, created a memorial outside Montanae's home. Flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes accumulated as the community processed its collective grief. "We heard her children playing in the yard just days before," one neighbor told local news. "Now they've lost their mother. It's devastating." The most immediate concern for many was the welfare of Montanae's 2 children. A GoFundMe campaign organized by her nursing colleagues raised over $50,000 in just 5 days to support their future care. The children are now living with Montanae's mother, who has requested privacy as they navigate their grief. In response to the tragedy, the Dayton Coalition Against Domestic Violence launched the Montanae Initiative, a program focused on helping women document threats and create safety plans. The program specifically addresses the critical gap between reporting threats and receiving protection, the very gap that cost Montanae her life. "If we can save even one person from experiencing what Montanae did," said Coalition Director Elena Rodriguez, "then her story will have created meaningful change." Montanae Davis's tragic death highlights a devastating reality. Sometimes, even when victims do everything right, even when they recognize danger, document threats, and call for help, the systems designed to protect them can fail. Her case offers critical lessons about domestic violence prevention and response that could save lives. The warning signs in Montanae's situation were textbook examples of escalating domestic violence. Jamartay Brown's behavior followed a pattern that experts recognize as highly dangerous: possessiveness, monitoring her social media, becoming enraged at her new relationship, making explicit threats, and finally, acting on those threats. This progression from control to threats to violence is a well-documented path that often precedes domestic homicide. What makes Montanae's case particularly heartbreaking is that she recognized these warning signs, explains Dr. Jennifer Marsh, a domestic violence researcher at Wright State University. She documented the threats. She called police. She did what we tell victims to do, and the system still failed her. One crucial tool that might have helped Montanae is a protection order. While not foolproof, protection orders create legal consequences for contact attempts and can trigger faster police response times. However, obtaining one requires appearing before a judge, something that can be difficult for working mothers like Montanae. "We need to make protection orders more accessible," says Montgomery County victim advocate Teresa Williams. "Many victims can't take time off work to attend court hearings, or they fear retaliation if they pursue legal action. For those currently in dangerous situations, resources exist that weren't fully utilized in Montanae's case. National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-7233 offers 24/7 crisis support and safety planning. YWCA emergency shelters provide immediate safe housing. Court advocates can help navigate the protection order process. High danger assessment protocols can identify lethal risk factors. Perhaps the most critical lesson from Montanae's case concerns police response to domestic violence calls. The 18-minute response time to her 911 call, while not unusually long by standard metrics, proved fatal. Domestic violence calls need to be prioritized differently, argues former police chief Michael Rodriguez, now a consultant on law enforcement reform. When someone reports threats with weapons, especially with children present, that needs an immediate lights and sirens response. Communities can implement several proven strategies to prevent similar tragedies. First, adopt lethality assessment protocols that help dispatchers and officers identify high-risk situations requiring urgent intervention. Second, create specialized domestic violence response units with officers trained to recognize danger signs and connect victims with resources immediately. Third, implement GPS monitoring for high-risk offenders who have made threats, providing victims with alert systems if the offender approaches their location. Fourth, establish rapid response protection order systems that can be implemented within hours, not days. The 15-minute window between Montanae's call and her murder represents a critical gap in our response systems, notes Rodriguez. Closing that gap requires rethinking how we prioritize and respond to domestic violence calls. For individuals, the message is equally important. Take threats seriously, document everything, inform friends and family about your situation, and create a safety plan that includes emergency contacts and safe locations. Montanae Davis did many things right in a terrifying situation. Her story reminds us that domestic violence prevention isn't just about what victims should do. It's about how our communities, law enforcement agencies, and legal systems must respond more effectively to protect those in danger. As we conclude Montanae Davis's story, we're left with the image of a 26-year-old nurse and mother whose life held so much promise. Her final act, calling 911 to protect her children, speaks volumes about who she was: courageous, protective, and clear-headed even in the face of mortal danger. Montanae's legacy now extends beyond her nursing career and the 2 children who will grow up without their mother. Her case has already sparked changes in how Dayton police prioritize domestic violence calls and has launched community initiatives bearing her name. The voice recorder she hid in her bedroom, now key evidence in the prosecution's case, reveals a woman who was fighting to protect herself in ways both visible and invisible to those around her. She was not just a victim. She was someone actively seeking safety in a system that ultimately couldn't respond quickly enough. As this case continues through the legal system, with Jamartay Brown currently in custody, facing multiple charges, including aggravated murder, Montanae's family awaits justice. The prosecution has built what legal experts describe as an exceptionally strong case, but the legal process is still unfolding. We will continue to follow this case and provide updates as they become available. If this story affected you, please consider liking and subscribing to Crime Scene Exposed. More importantly, share this video with someone who might need to recognize these warning signs in their own life or the life of someone they care about. What do you think could have been done differently to save Montanae's life? Your insights in the comments below might help others recognize danger before it's too late. For those currently feeling unsafe in a relationship, remember, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. Montanae's story reminds us that no one should face these dangers alone.